Can your boss actually save you from burnout? Hi, I'm Brett, the Audio Boss. I have over 10 years of leadership experience, and I also am an autistic leader with ADHD. On this channel, I take a strengths-based approach to autism and ADHD in the corporate workplace. In today's video, I'm taking a look at a research study that came out earlier this year from the National Library of Medicine. It takes a look at burnout in the workplace. Using research data from Gallup, the research study shows that if organizations don't take burnout seriously, it could be disastrous for their organizations and increase more burnout from employees. The study talks about how an organization can contribute to an individual's burnout, but as that individual's burnout gets worse, it can kind of reverberate back out into other employees and throughout the organization, making the entire organization suffer as it grows within the organization. That burnout can cause a negative attitude towards the entire organization. It can reduce engagement among colleagues and employees. It can also reduce productivity as well. So if an organization wants to turn their ship around when it comes to engagement scores, negative engagement, and productivity, they need to take burnout more seriously. Burnout can occur within an organization when there's no plan to replace resources for teams. But the study shows that when there is a plan to support employees in their burnout and to give them proper rest and replenish resources, increased rest can bring replenished resources back into the organization. That need to replenish the individual goes on to include emotional and mental and spiritual resources, and it has to be rest that is not just a temporary fix but can be long-lasting rest, which means, according to this research study, ongoing rest where individuals can take clean cuts from work in the non-working hours away from work, meaning that they need to be able to step fully away from work, think about work, not worry about work, not be concerned about work, not be bothered by work, and allow their minds to not only rest, but to engage in other activities that fully take their minds off of work entirely. The study cites 5 different cases of burnout: unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workloads, unclear communication from a manager, lack of managerial support, and unreasonable time pressure or unfair treatment at work. Now, it also cites that this can be specifically to how the individual employee feels these things are happening to them. So if an individual perceives that they are being treated unfair, or they perceive a lack of their managerial support, or they are themselves struggling with unclear communication from their manager. All of these things from a manager's perspective might seem like something that's not happening, but if the employee thinks or feels these things are happening, that contributes to their specific individual burnout, making it an organizational problem. Research study goes on to cite ways to address those 5 specific things, such as giving employees compulsory flexible scheduling, meaning agency with responsibilities, specifically citing that employees feel that they need more time to complete tasks, and when given more time to complete those tasks, employees are much happier with the work that they've produced, and it increases their engagement. They also require adequate breaks, not just breaks throughout the day, but breaks away from work that are supported by work. If the workplace and the organization creates a culture where taking rest and breaks is normalized and encouraged and celebrated, then the more people feel they can comfortably step away from work, shut their minds off from work, and can do other things, the more they come back rested, and the more they come back more engaged and prepared to take on bigger challenges at work. When people feel they have more time to finish a task, the research points out that they are 70% less likely to enter burnout. But the biggest issue in the research study comes down to having that lack of managerial support. If people don't feel they have their manager's support, they don't feel that they can do their best work. But for those employees that do feel psychological safety from their managers, feel they can do more, feel they're less likely to burn out, feel that they can have more time to do what they need to do at work. Even when the role or the task or the job itself is quite challenging, they have that emotional support from their boss and they feel psychologically safe. The research study shows they have an increase in engagement and are less likely to burn out. The research study goes on to show that leaders who specifically support rest and taking breaks from work and are aware when an employee is getting overworked or stressed or needs time off and then actively supports that employee to go take that time can considerably directly reduce the amount of burnout that happens at work. And the more leaders do this inside of an organization, the more the organization is seen as favorable, the more likely people are to stay at that organization, and they are less likely to leave or have negative engagement scores. They also point out other factors that can contribute to burnout, such as Zoom fatigue, that ever since the pandemic, more and more we are staying on longer meetings and we're having a harder time stepping away from work, always having to be on cameras or always having to be on more meetings. That Zoom fatigue, as it's called in the research study, can make work feel like it never ends, which can lead to increased exhaustion. It also leads to a lack of feeling an accomplishment. Lack of feeling accomplishment, according to the research study, also leads to low morale and lower workplace performance. People are basically feeling like they can't get anything done either because they're in too many meetings or they're in too many Zoom calls, and they're not being given adequate time to get their other work done. Research study points out that the more an organization can maintain a healthy work-life balance, the more employee suffering will reduce and greater productivity will occur. The study stresses that psychological detachment from work, that switch off mode, has to happen in a way for the employee to forget about work during their non-work time, and that rest is critical to avoiding burnout or to recover from burnout or to stop burnout from rippling through an entire organization. Anyone who's refusing to unwind during off-job hours will naturally have more negative effects at work and towards more colleagues. The study even cites that simple things like taking naps, feeling like you can take a break and just go take a nap or meditate, even small things like that can help as long as you're getting support from the organization and support from your boss. So, should your boss recommend you go take a nap? Quite possibly, it might actually help. And a part of that rest, the research study points out that finding activities for off-job times that provide challenging opportunities for us to learn in other domains helps distract us from the main job. And that the more we can find ways to give ourselves that agency outside of work hours, the stronger we get, the more mentally sharp we are, the more it helps us rest, and the more it helps us to have those cut off and those breaks from work, which helps us to be more productive at work. It helps us to come back sharper, stronger, with better ideas, to be more effective in the workplace. Now, leadership styles make or break this. Without a good leadership style that supports this, the whole thing is completely wasted, it's completely gone and right out the window. The research study breaks down 3 different types of leadership styles: transformational, transactional, and passive-aggressive. A transformational leader is going to inspire people to go and do. They're going to inspire people inside the job. They're going to inspire them to take breaks. They're going to encourage their people. They're going to bring them along in an inspiring way. The transformational leader is also going to recognize when their team is suffering, when someone's in pain, when someone's stressed, when someone is starting to experience burnout or they're overworked. They're going to step in and they're going to actively be a participant in helping that employee find their way towards rest, encourage them to take time off, encourage to find ways to take things off their plate so that they can have a lesser workload, so that they can avoid burnout or recover from burnout. The second type of leadership is transactional leadership. Now, this one's a little bit different. So sort of in between the other 2 leadership styles. This is one that maintains the status quo and sort of leads the team by rewards and consequences. This type of leadership style is only going to act when the problem actually arises. But when it does arise, they're going to take action. They're also only going to act if leadership above them tells them that they have to act and tells them how it's better for the organization. This is the type of leadership style that's going to have strong rewards and strong consequences. They're going to lead more teams that are going to feel like they have to respond to that email after hours, or going to feel like they're going to be punished, or that there will be a consequence from a promotion or some other kind of reward if they don't act at all hours of the day, sort of getting back to the whole organizational problem that leads to burnout in the first place. But if these leaders recognize that they need to make this change and they make it a part of telling their teams that it's possible, then those teams will follow along, also believing that that transactional part of the relationship between them and their boss will help them gain the rewards that they're looking for in the workplace. The third leadership style that the study points out is a passive avoidant leadership, also could be known as a passive-aggressive leadership style. Now, this type of leadership style directly impacts meaning it directly creates more burnout inside of the workplace. This is a disengaged leadership style where leaders avoid responsibility and delay decision making. They're least effective in promoting recovery experiences and employees' well-being. They specifically lead to higher stress on their teams and lower organizational productivity. They're also more likely to take credit for anything when things do go right. Their leadership style specifically leads to higher stress and lower organizational productivity. These are the type of leaders that should probably be replaced inside of an organization if an organization is going to thrive or simply do better. Now, I'll link to the study below so that you can read it in full detail, but essentially that recognizes for most employees, their leadership style specifically contributes to whether or not an employee is going to lead to more burnout or be able to recover from burnout. Now, what this research study does not do is differentiate between neurodivergent and neurotypical minds in the workplace, although I wish it did. But if you are a neurodivergent individual, I'm sure you can recognize some of yourself in the research study and where certain areas could be more amplified for our needs and our specific brains. Now, when you add in the extra steps of being autistic or ADHD, we need more of those types of transformational leadership styles. That transformational leadership is most likely going to be responsive to having someone on their team who expresses they need accommodations or they need certain styles or certain leadership needs. For my autism and my ADHD, I need these specific things. I need better communication. When we look at those 5 specific cases that lead to burnout, you can think about it through the lens of autism and ADHD and how these are probably things that we manage and we're trying to think about every single day, regardless of if we're in burnout yet or not, or even if we are, these things are immediately amplified. The difference between burnout for an autistic person or a neurotypical versus a neurodivergent, we're already jumping through all these different hoops and trying to navigate a more neurotypical world. So when you add these other factors in, it just sort of makes our mental jumps a little bit harder for us to navigate, which can increase the likelihood that we get to burnout a little bit faster. If you're a manager watching this video and you have some sort of influence inside your organization, I would also recommend that you take into account that for neurodivergent minds, some of these things are even more amplified and they may need more support when having some of these burnout issues occur. And it's almost even more important that a neurodivergent mind take rest and take breaks. And for those of us who have ADHD in particular, it may be hard for us to specifically want to move away from or take those breaks because our minds tend to spin, specifically on work things. But the more we can take those breaks, the more we can have those clean breaks and let our ADHD find a different topic or a different resource or a different project or something outside of work that can let our minds go wild, the more that's actually going to help us recover from burnout. And it's also the more it's going to help us exist outside of work. And it's not to say this will fully recover all of our burnout. There are many things that need to contribute into helping recover from burnout. That is a topic for an entirely different video, which I do have planned for the future. In the meantime, one small thing you can do is prioritize rest, prioritize clean breaks, turning off any emails or messaging or things on your phone or your devices that are going to come into your personal space when you're taking off work time away from work. When you want to be off of work, be off of work. Take full, complete breaks from work. And I say that as somebody who's a boss where that is really hard for me to do, but I'm working harder and harder on doing specifically that. And the more I do that, that's better for me. It's better for my mental health. It's better for my well-being. I have found that to make me a better, more improved, more engaged person at work for my stuff. I'm Brett, the Audi Boss. Thanks for watching this video. I have linked below to the research study. Please do check it out for more information on that and citing all of their resources. And I would encourage you to take a deep dive into that, but think about how you can take rest. What ways can you have rest that can be clean breaks from work on those non-working hours? How can you step away in a way that will support your mental health and give you rest back? What are some activities that you can specifically do that can put your mind on something else while you take non-work hours? And ultimately, my message for you would be your rest, your mental health, your care is far more important than the job itself. It is important to prioritize your well-being over the organization's well-being, because if you can't take care of yourself, it's going to be harder for you to show up in the workplace. I hope this video was helpful. Please like and subscribe, and please comment below if you have a topic or something you'd like for me to create a video on, or a resource you'd like for me to create on this topic about ADHD or autism in the workplace. I'm Brett, the Audi Boss. Please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And please check out some of the other videos while you're here. Thanks for watching.